This morning, U.S. Central Command confirmed that a heavy wave of strikes against Iran were completed. It comes after President Trump threatened a beating for a foiled sneak attack on U.S. assets in Jordan. I want to get back to the group chat. Ayman, I turn to you first again. You've been tracking this war closely. What do you make of this latest escalation?
There's a few things to it. One, the fear factor of American power in the military fear factor has been broken. And let me just kind of like reset that for a second, because I didn't articulate it clearly. There was always a projection of power that America had in the Middle East that would kind of make countries in the region, certainly adversaries, take into consideration American military might when they were making their own calculations, whether that was non-state actors, whether it was adversaries, or whether it's enemies like Iran. And I think in this case, that fear factor has now been broken. The Iranians have demonstrated they're willing to enter into a cycle of violence in which America used to have what they call escalation dominance. America has the ability to dominate any escalation militarily all the way up to potentially nuclear war. I'm not saying that's what America was going to do. I'm just saying they always had that ladder, and so they could always escalate that dominance. We can kill leaders. We can bomb indiscriminately. We can do whatever we want. The Iranians no longer have that fear when they make their calculation as to what they want from the Americans. They've taken over the Strait of Hormuz. Nothing is opening. They're attacking our allies despite the fact that the U.S. doesn't want them to. They are capable of attacking Israel if Israel attacks Iran. And now they're killing American soldiers in bases that we're not even very honest about that exist in those countries. We don't even talk openly about military bases in Jordan. That calculation means there's a new dynamic emerging in the Middle East, and I think it puts America on a much weaker footing. So you can arguably say that America's involvement in this Iran war has now made us, our allies, much weaker in the region than where we were the night that this war began, February 27th.
This whole art of the deal, we are not talking about a real estate transaction, a casino in Atlantic City, but the threats between a beating, an obliteration, an escalation, and peace talks, they're not working. They're not working literally as it relates to the war, but they're also not working politically.
This has been a series of bluffs that have been called by a government that in Iran has, of course, been broken and then reshaped and is now even more hardline and stronger in control of the strait, and also, I think, foreseeably so. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's the thing. Look, everything that I have learned in studying what could have been foreseen here indicates that if there is any nation to go against where you should fear that they're going to take this to the absolute limit,
yes,
it's Iran.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it's the worst country to go against when you just are bluffing. Because now what happens next? You send in literal boots on the ground? Like what?
And I go back to really quick. I go back to the point early in the war when Donald Trump on TV says, I don't think our generals knew that they were going to take the Strait of Hormuz, right? And it goes to show you either he's throwing American generals under the bus, because it's just hard for me to imagine that the Pentagon, which spends billions of dollars a year gaming out scenarios like invasions, has incredible, robust intelligence to understand what the Iranians are probably thinking 10 steps ahead, did not think that the Iranians would take over the Strait of Hormuz.
As did our NATO allies.
As did our Arab allies. Yes, exactly. And what does Donald Trump say? He just stands up there and goes, oh, well, nobody had thought that they were going to take the Strait of Hormuz.
What I still get hung up on here is we're coming up on 6 months ago when they took out Iran's supreme leader. And I thought to myself, I'm not an expert in national security, but I thought, wouldn't they know that there would be very sophisticated succession planning here?
Yeah.
And that someone else surely will step in, and someone behind them, and someone behind them, and someone behind them. And yet we just watched it all unfold over months. And the appearance that there was just absolutely no strategic thinking or planning ahead of this absolute catastrophic boondoggle that this country has now gotten itself into.
I hate to phrase it this way, but this has been one of the most unserious processes I've ever seen. When you start with the diplomatic, discussions that occurred early on, there was no one there with the type of experience who put together the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, during the Obama years, which required 1,500 pages of detailed documentation.
That was negotiated by nuclear physicists,
yes,
right?
Exactly. Yeah,
this is being negotiated by a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Like literally, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are negotiating a nuclear agreement with the Iranians when the JCPOA literally had technical experts in those meetings, and the Secretary of Energy, who was...
We're holding nuclear enrichment to 3.67% of their uranium, right? So that they can't get towards nuclear weaponry. And then once you start the war, as you rightly point out, none of this was thought through. If you go back to World War II, we carpet bombed Tokyo. It didn't end the war. We carpet bombed Dresden in Germany. It didn't end the war, right? None of this has been thought out to its, logical series of consequences. And as you rightly say, I mean, Iran's not the place that you decide, these guys will go down with the ship.
They're making AI memes, mocking.
Their propaganda machine is incredible. Yeah.
How long will the United States consumer accept this economic pain? Because
that's the question.
Iran is willing to accept the pain. They do not care what it inflicts on their country or their people. But the American consumer, from the get-go, was like, why are you doing this? I mean, investors might say, oh, this was never a priority for us. We're going to keep on trucking. But for the American consumer, when they go to the grocery store, when they fill their tank with gas, and at the end of the week, when those two necessary functions are costing them hundreds of additional dollars, they say, no basta.
The thing about why the president is still doing the J6 weaponization fund, why is he talking about the Smithsonian and getting woke out of the museums? It's because it's like the let them eat cake moment. It's like, we can't do anything about the war that is draining our economy, that does nothing for you. In fact, you probably said, we want no more foreign wars. We can do nothing that's going to help you on that front. We can't even spin it. So we'll give you the empty calories of fighting woke too. And so the question, though, is when does it become obvious, Steph, that if you go 1 degree further and connect what's happening in the Middle East to the reason you can't afford the things you used to be able to, when Americans make that small jump, what happens then?
Well, they've made it. I mean, if you look at consumer sentiment, readings, that jump has already been made. The making of choices between filling your gas tank and buying your groceries is political dynamite. And that's what I think in the midterms you'll start to see.
Katie?
No, I was just going to say, I do think, yes, there are more Americans to make that jump. But I think from everything that I've seen, many of them are there. And I think for Trump, I just look at the midterms and it is just this like looming red flag, like 5-alarm fire when it comes to this conflict. And from all the reporting, of course, that we've all read, he's looking for an out. He's looking to extract himself and can't quite seem to figure out how to do it. Do you escalate and go all in, or do you pull out and look like a total idiot?
But this goes right back to his initial miscalculation, right? Yeah. A war is not a trade war, right? In a trade war, the president could say, I'm going to call off Liberation Day. And even though everybody is so angry about the headache that ensued or the money that it cost, whether it's a foreign country or a business or the leader of a big or small business, they're like, phew, this war made no sense anyway. Let's call it off. This is totally different. Iran isn't Vietnam saying, I'm so glad we can start shipping things there really cheaply.
We have to ask a question. And I know this might be a little bit of a hot take, but we have to ask the question, why are we in this war? And you cannot ignore that question without asking the question about what Israel wanted in this war and where they are now. And if you watch what Israeli media has been saying a little bit about this war, they're done with it. They don't want to have this war anymore. They have elections coming up. Israeli leaders are saying this is America's war right now. We don't need to be fighting it right now. America has gone on with this. So that abandonment in the way this war started and where we are now fighting this war is a quagmire. It's a mess. And I don't think enough people are asking and probing that question in a way that I think answers that. Lindsey Graham's video that came out recently this week in the Wall Street Journal shed light on that. But I think that we have to fundamentally ask these questions about why we got into this war and whose war we are.
I don't know about that, because there were Republicans who were worried this week when Netanyahu was meeting with the president. They were worried about the outcome of that meeting because they all remember all of that reporting around the Situation Room, around Netanyahu being there sitting across from Donald Trump when advisors to Trump said, this thing isn't a great idea. And he said, yep, let's do it.
I think you are daring people to ask questions, and the answer, the category of answer, right? How versed you are on the Middle East is, I think, irrelevant at a certain point. It's about, this isn't for us. Mm-hmm. And so who is it for? Genuinely, what is the best answer that they have right now?
Which was the argument they made when they said, let's wipe out USAID because it doesn't serve us. Exactly. And all of those people got behind him on that.
But there's also a risk of a quantum leap here that's not yet being fully discussed, which is China is now providing Iran with shoulder-mounted rockets that can take out U.S. forces. We are also seeing, for some unknown reason, U.S. military individuals leaking information that our munition stocks are running down. We are getting to that precipice of where this this thing could spin out of control, not just regionally, but potentially globally. And no one's really talking about the seriousness of how far this can spread and how long this can go on. And I think the more players you see entering the fray, the higher the risk.
Just to add to Ron's very important point, Saudi Arabia this week opened that new front with Yemen, and Saudi Arabia being one of the world's largest oil producers, if they get dragged into a war where they are now suddenly being impacted, their oil production goes down, I can assure you, and I'm not the economist at the table here, I think it takes on a whole different dynamic when you have the two major waterways that basically all of the world's oil flow goes through the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. Both of those sides are shut down because of a war that we started. I think it's a different dynamic.